So good morning, everyone. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement by Kim Diocampo. Usually we have Karina Gould here, but she has sanctioned our amazing sister, Kim, who I love and love to see her and hear her speak. This morning, she's going to do our land acknowledgement. Kim Diocampo is a Tuolumne Miwok Huma Choctaw African American who is a member of the Sacred Sites Protection and Rights Indigenous Spirits, SSPRIT, it's the acronym, and a board member of Segurite Land Trust. So thank you for sitting in for Karina. We have been blessed, who has also blessed us with her amazing words. But this morning, we're going to hear from another beautiful human who recently had a relative transition, Wounded Knee Diocampo. He was an amazing, amazing Indigenous leader. I loved seeing him every time I did, and he had this beautiful staff that I was able to hold and gave me such joy. And you could just feel the love and the energy from that staff with the eagle claw and the eagle feathers. So thank you, Kim. And it was an honor to be at Wounded's Memorial recently. But thank you for being here, and go ahead.
Excuse me. Can you all hear me? Oh, okay. So, I'm just gonna start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And I would like to just start with the land acknowledgement, and then I would like to acknowledge that you are on, that are in out there in Berkeley and Oakland and the Bay Area, that you are on the unceded territories of the Ohlone nations, who you all know have lovingly stewarded this ancestral land since time immemorial. And I myself am speaking to you from the city of Vallejo, which is the home of the Karkeen Ohlone and the Bay, Miwok, and the Patwin peoples. For those of you living in the Bay Area, the ancestral land is Huchun, home of the Lashan Ohlone, led by the fearless tribal leader Karina Gould. And for me as a California native, I feel it's so important to understand the history of the land you occupy, as we recognize the colonization and the genocide and the theft that has created so much inequities that we continue to experience. So, I scribbled some things down, so because I know you have a full schedule. Um, I just want to honor, as it is, November is Native American Heritage Month, and so I certainly want to honor our strength, our courage, our resistance to colonization and capitalism, to protect our culture and traditions, and our love for our sacred earth, which we all must all protect if we expect to continue to exist. You know. So, with that, I just, you know, thought about some other things that what we're talking about now, and that simply is what just recently happened, you know, what did happen. But anyway, with the recent presidential elections, the timing of addressing fascism couldn't come at a more important time. And you had this already scheduled months in advance, and so here we are. As an authoritarian regime is set to take over the U.S. politics. And right now we all share that fear, that sadness, that rage, that anxiety for what is yet to come. And I'm just trying to process my own emotions, and as indigenous people, fascism and repression are nothing new to us. We have been pushing back against settler colonial aggressions for over 500 years. And, the Trump administration is moving possibly to dismantle our tribal sovereignty. And it is part of the Project 2025, which will further accelerate the capitalist, exploitive, and extraction of what lands we do have left. Think about what happened at Standing Rock. There'll be more of that happening. And and we will see an increase in oil pipelines without permits, without tribal and environmental consultation, extractive mining projects destroying the balance of ecosystems. So, this is what's coming for us who are here to talk about the climate. And so also, and so I just wanted to just simply say that, we have some very difficult times with the growing right wing agenda that will deny us our humanity, and especially of our most vulnerable people. And prioritizing profits over the planet will leave us all exhausted, traumatized, and unwell. So in this moment, I just want to just clearly say that we need each other more than ever. And so that we can build the world that we have all been dreaming of, and to strengthen our connections to the land, to the water, and all the living beings. And so everyone on here, we've got to come together and really, really work a whole lot harder to push back on all of these horrific things that are getting ready to come with when he takes office. And so with that, I just want to thank you all for allowing me to be here, and here we are. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, it is emotional. You're gonna make me emotional. Which I haven't cried about it yet, but wow. Yeah. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Starting our day on the right track. Um, so welcome to the CEMTF Fifth Virtual Summit Series, Colonization and Rights for Humans and Nature, Climate and Fascism. Fascism. It's hard for me to even say the word right now. Not enough coffee, but we'll be saying that a lot late, I'm sure. And this is our third in a five-part series. And I'm Cheryl Davila, the founder of the CEMTF and a former council member in the city of Berkeley. And I do a lot of things. I'm part of the founder of the Berkeley Equity Summit Alliance, which is a BIPOC Berkeley community group, and Mobilize Berkeley, where we do have climate community healing gatherings, and we're organizing one for December 6th, which I'll let you know about in the future. And also, um, I just became or will be becoming a board member for the Interfaith Council of Alameda County. And I'm part of the network of elected officials and staff, Friends of Adeline. And we need to be continuing. Oh, and also I'm on the local station board for KPFA, which is all very interesting. But we need to be continuing to be in the streets to end the genocide and the occupation and be in solidarity to free Palestine, to free Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, the Congo, Haiti, and to free us all from the oppression, the greed, the racism, the colonization, the hatred, and bigotry. So much has happened since Climate and Health in September. As my sister Kim has said, now we're going to have a fascist president who's racist, misogynist, has 30 some odd felonies against him, um, sexual assaults, all these things, which if he were black, he would be in jail, under the jail, never get out of the jail. Um, but that's not the case. He's a white man getting away with all these things. But that's beside the point. But I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you to the CEMTF Planning and Logistics, Jack and Karina, because we all volunteered to do all this, and we have meetings weekly to plan these events. And I want to thank the steering committee as well. And I want to thank the speakers, Kim, Max, the Honorable Alameda County DA, Pamela Price, Jacob, Pierre, Jim, and Nida. And thank you to the other two speakers who I'm praying for their healing because they got sick and had to step out. And I want to thank you all for being here and for your donations. And if you haven't donated already, there's still time. And then, if you don't know this, CEMTF is in its 5th year. We were hoping to have an event, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year, but maybe in the beginning of next year on the anniversary again. So I also want to thank our mentors. I mean, our UC Berkeley fellows who we mentor and guide, and their amazing work that they're doing this year and for the past 2 years. And we're here today to talk about climate and fascism. Fascism is defined as an authoritarian and nationalistic right-wing system of government and social organization. Robert Paxton says fascism is a form of political behavior marked by obsessive preoccupation with community decline, humiliation, or victimhood by compensatory cults of unity, energy, and purity, in which the mass-based party of committed nationalist militants work in uneasy but effective collaboration with traditional elites, abandons democratic liberties, and pursues with redemptive violence and without ethical or legal restraints, goals of internal cleansing and external expansion. Authoritarianism is a political system characterized by rejection of a political polarity, the use of strong central power to preserve the political status quo, and reductions in democracy, separation of powers, civil liberties, and the rule of law. Nationalist, as a noun, is a person who strongly identifies with their own nation, vigorously supports its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of interests of other nations. That being said, that's what we're facing right now. And we're in a heap of trouble, as I always say, and the heap keeps getting larger and larger. Every month is hotter than the last. Temperatures are rising everywhere. There's hurricanes, tornadoes, and now we got the fascists in the White House who survived an assassination attempt, who will continue the ethnic cleansing and genocide, now expanded, and a threat of nuclear war, continued gun violence, police killings, recalls, billionaires in APAC wiping out the democratic process, women's right to choose, Zionism and fascism, although it's here, the heap is larger. Let's not forget COVID and homelessness and mental health, fentanyl crisis, and all the other things that are going on in this world today. It's a sad situation, but somehow we have to find our joy, find our way to be united and in solidarity. So ponder all that while we listen to our amazing speakers. Please sit back, get your coffee, your tea, your water, your breakfast, and let's hear from our amazing speakers today to talk about climate and fascism. Thank you all for being here. And we're going to start with having our our fellows are going to introduce each speaker, and Jack is also going to introduce a speaker as well.
I
So
get
thank you.
I get to introduce the first speaker today, who is my very good friend, Max Elbaum. And I'm really excited that Max is here because I've always admired his astute political analysis and strategy making. He's an editorial board member of Convergence magazine. He's played an important role as an advocate of the block and build strategy. And so I'm looking forward to his talk titled Blocking Fascism and Building a Sustainable Human Civilization. So take it away, Max.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Kim. Thank you to all the organizers of this very important meeting. Can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I really appreciate the opportunity to be in dialogue with you all today. As Kim and Cheryl said, we're meeting at a very dangerous moment. For many years now, the community that's gathered here on this call has known that action to combat climate change was not taking place at the speed and scale necessary to avert potentially catastrophic harm to people and the planet. We've long felt that the urgent action needed was being impeded by the fossil fuel industry, its allies, and its bought and paid for government and the media. Now, 10 days after the US election, the most powerful forces opposed to action on climate change are an integral part of the authoritarian bloc that has won control of the presidency, the Senate, the House, and already controlled the majority on the Supreme Court. That bloc openly talks about imposing authoritarian rule to implement its agenda that's been accurately described as white Christian nationalism, and it includes outright fascists in its political core. The part of the agenda that concerns environmental issues and climate change can be summed up in their own slogan, drill, baby, drill. Its underlying justification is a combination of outright climate change denialism and lies and misinformation about the alternatives to fossil fuels. The specifics of its environment program are laid out in Project 2025 manifesto. You can read a summary of their environmental plan in a very useful document put together by the Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment. And Jack's going to put a link to that document in the chat. Among the lowlights, withdrawal from all international climate change gatherings and agreements, drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, rolling back just about every environmental protection regulation won over the last several decades. The impact, if even a portion of this program is implemented, is potentially catastrophic, not just for people in the United States, but for people all across the globe. Our task is to block as much of this from happening as possible, to move constituencies who wake up to the impact of climate change into opposition to those who would impede action on it, to build enough power for the progressive forces in US society to end the MAGA bloc's control of the government, and to start a new progressive cycle in US politics, one that includes decisive action on climate change as an integral part of its agenda. To offer some thoughts on how we might be able to do that, I want to first talk about how we got to this point, and then I'll offer some ideas on the resistance that we need to mount in the next few years. We didn't get here just because of the shortcomings of the Democratic Party leadership in this election, damaging as those have been. And the election result is not due mainly to Trump's skill as a demagogue, underestimated as these skills too often are. Also, it's not a storyline in which climate issues are at the core of the plot. To understand how we got here, we need to take a more step-back look that expands our frame in terms of issues and in terms of history. The bottom line is that we are now living through the most intense phase of the 60-year backlash against the gains of the 1960s, the gains made by the Black-led civil rights movement in particular. This backlash has gone through several stages. It started with Nixon's Southern strategy to rally Southern whites to the Republican Party. It continued through Ronald Reagan's election and the rise of what we then called Reaganomics, and today people term neoliberalism. It continued with the Tea Party response to the election of the first Black president. And now it takes the form of the Make America Great MAGA movement under Donald Trump. This backlash has been driven by some of the most powerful forces in U.S. political life. First and foremost, it's been driven by big sections of the corporate and financial elite that never accepted the New Deal, much less the expansion of the welfare state and political democracy in the 1960s. And these plutocrats have gathered a mass base among the layers of the population who are most invested in so-called traditional forms of racial and gender hierarchy. It has a mass base that is organized and politicized with its core in the white evangelical churches that regard racial and gender hierarchies, so-called traditional values, as ordained by God, and feel that they are on a holy mission to transform U.S. society, to stop the general drift toward a more secular society and expansion of the notion of gender identity and gender roles, as well as the end of racial inequality. They feel it's their God-given mission to turn that back. The backlash, spearheaded by these corporate forces and their mass base, began within hours of passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. It really took off in 1968 with Nixon's campaign and the Southern strategy, and a whole series of right-wing campaigns against gay and lesbian people and affirmative action and school integration in the 1970s. The fossil fuel industry jumped whole hog into this backlash effort in the 1980s and the 1990s. They recognized that this backlash force could be the key force that would break up the generally bipartisan support for action to protect the environment that had existed in the 1970s. In the 1970s, there was no measurable difference between the Democratic base and the Republican base's attitude toward environmental issues. That started to change with the right-wing offensive and the fossil fuel industry sponsored disinformation campaigns in the 1980s and the 1990s. They added their weight to the crusade to gut government regulations of all kinds, to discredit science, to foster conspiracy theories, and scapegoat various groups who could be othered, and to turn attention away from the problems caused by putting profit-making above the well-being of people and the planet. This backlash made numerous gains over the following years, and especially important was the takeover of the judiciary, carefully planned and executed by the Federalist Society. The result included major steps weakening an already flawed system of political democracy. Federal judges, in a process that was legal but not democratically legitimate, legal but not legitimate, just like Jim Crow was legal but not legitimate for 80 years, gutted the Voting Rights Act, okayed partisan gerrymandering, green-lighted voter suppression. And then the Citizens United decision opened the door to a huge expansion of unregulated money flowing into the electoral process. All this skewed elections was layered upon the top of what was already a racist system, where the Electoral College and the Senate are racist, have a racist foundation and give undue power to smaller, largely white states. More recently, the MAGA Supreme Court, who are well described as politicians in robes, this is not a neutral judicial body. These are right-wing justices vetted by the Federalist Society and put on the court to accomplish their political ends of this long political backlash. And most recently, that court immunized Donald Trump from accountability for his coup attempt and put its stamp of approval on the president acting above the law. Those of us on this call who are as old as I am might remember Nixon's statement back in 1973 or 74, when the president does it, it's not illegal. At the time, this was considered an admission of wrongdoing and caused a furor because it exposed Nixon's contempt for the law. Today, the MAGA-controlled Supreme Court has made Nixon's line, when the president does it, it's not illegal, the law of the land. It's also important to note that the current phase of the MAGA backlash against the gains of the 1960s is the most extreme yet. It's the most extreme in its program yet. And the reason it's the most extreme is because these forces feel threatened by the changes in US society. Two things in particular. One, the demographic change and the rising proportion of peoples of color in the country. This is projected to be a so-called majority-minority country, 2030, 2040. People argue about the date, but sometime in the next 20 years. Second, because the younger generations are very discontent with the world they've inherited, especially around issues of climate change. This is a generation that feels the sword of Damocles hanging over their head in terms of their future from a very young age, and are the most progressive, radical generation in many, many decades. Given that, the core forces of MAGA believe they know their actual program is unpopular. And if the country had a democratic system of one person, one vote, where everyone's vote counted equally, they would rapidly be out of power. So they're into dispensing with that kind of system. This is the core political tenet that accompanies their other tenets, and they've been very upfront about it. At a number of the conferences of conservatives in the last few years, people say outright, it's bad to let too many people vote. And there are Elon Musk and some of the forces at the core of the Trump administration are open about the fact that they believe in elite rule their rule, believing that their wealth gives them wisdom to rule, and contempt for even expressions of democracy verbally, even ones that are hypocritical. This is the accompaniment to their economic program of facilitating private profit above all else, their social program of enforcing rigid gender roles, pushing women back into the home, their program around race relations, which is for a new form of Jim Crow, an energy program based upon endless fossil fuel extraction, a foreign policy program of global hegemony backed by military force, and as Cheryl pointed out, its most extreme expression right now in its enabling complicity with and active backing the genocide taking place in Gaza. This kind of program, a US version of fascism, it's homegrown. It taps into deep patterns in US history. It's not an aberration. This is why the slogan, "This is not who we are," is an ineffective argument against MAGA. There have always been two strands in US history. There's been a strand based upon wealth, power, privilege, that from the early stages, from the founding of this country, its actual founding in 1619, based on racial slavery and genocide of the indigenous people. And that strand has always been in conflict with a stand for bottom-up democracy, an inclusive democracy, multiracial, multi-ethnic, gender inclusive, including all those who are affected by US politics. Those two strands have been fighting each other since the Europeans first set foot on this continent, and that conflict is what shapes our situation today. So this is not an aberration in US history. This is a regaining of power by one of the two strands that's been in conflict. Trump himself is more a product of this dynamic than he is the creator of a new current in US life. But it is true that Trump has played a unique role in unleashing its crudest elements, normalizing open expressions of bigotry and hate. And in this last election, he tapped into the discontent felt by electorate in search of change in order to portray himself as the change candidate. He successfully branded MAGA as a force for change, even though the change that they are promising to bring is full of lies and will benefit no one but the wealthiest sectors of society. Of course, ever since Trump walked down that escalator in 2015 to announce his candidacy for president, then there's been resistance. 2016 didn't only see Trump's campaign, it saw Bernie Sanders' campaign, which exceeded expectations in setting a pro-working class, anti-corporate progressive pole in national politics. And in the wake of Bernie's campaign, a broad range of left and progressive forces embraced a power-building strategy that would combine electoral work and extra-electoral protests and non-electoral campaigns in a strategy to seek progressive governing power. On the electoral side, this current move to do politics inside the Democratic Party, where it would contend with the mainstream Democratic Party leadership, would work to forge the broadest possible front to stop the MAGA right wing, but do so in a way that didn't just strengthen the leadership of the Democratic Party, but rather strengthened the role and the base of the social justice movements, which contended for leadership of the anti-MAGA front. And this is the motion that led to the election of the squad in Congress. It's the kind of framework that people who went and canvassed in swing states in 2020 and 2024 They did so with locally based grassroots organizations that campaigned year-round, not just at election time. And big sections of the climate change the movement to stop climate change, were part of that motion, especially those framing their fight as the battle for a Green New Deal and the fight to get the government to declare a climate emergency. Many of the forces pursuing this strategy term it block and build, block the right and build the independent power of the progressives and the left. And Jack's going to put in the chat a link to a 7-session syllabus for group study and individual self-study that was prepared by Convergence magazine on this idea of a block and build strategy. Forces carrying out that strategy made a big contribution to defeating Trump in 2020, and especially with Bernie's campaign in 2020, influencing the Biden administration's early policies. But for reasons that are still being discussed on the left, I'm not going to try to do a hot take analysis here. Inflation, the government's Gaza policy, major missteps and blind spots by Kamala when she stepped up when Biden withdrew, meant that the anti-MAGA majority did not turn out in 2024. It was a decisive victory, the election for MAGA, but not mainly because millions and millions of people switched from voting for Democrats to voting for the Republicans, more because millions of people who were opposed to MAGA's agenda were not inspired by the Democratic Party campaign and stayed home. The turnout in 2024, at least 6 to 8 million less votes for Kamala than Biden got in 2020. So the next stage of our work at blocking the right and building progressive power is much harder. A few quick things about the next stage, and then I'm going to close. With the levers of power in MAGA's hands, this is going to be very rough. As has already been mentioned, the most vulnerable groups are going to be targeted. They have an agenda to mass deportations and assault on immigrants. I'm sure that Pierre is going to talk to us a little bit about that, and in particular targeting so egregious of Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, and all those lies that were spread as part of the campaign. Trans people will be hit by a crackdown on care options. There will be a green light to non-state actors to intensify anti-trans harassment and violence. There's a plan from the same people who brought us Project 2025 to dismantle the entire pro-Palestine movement under the guise of combating anti-Semitism. It's expressed openly in a document called Project Esther from the Heritage Foundation. Jack's going to put the link to Project Esther in the chat. We should know, it can't be emphasized enough, that the struggle for Palestinian rights right now is not only a struggle to stop a genocide and win Palestinian people their rights. Right now, the struggle for Palestinian rights is at the cutting edge of the global fight for peace, the fight to make international law mean anything. And in the United States, it's at the cutting edge of the right to protest in general, since the right wing and people, even within the Democratic Party, are using a crackdown on protesters for Palestinian rights as a way to ramp up the repressive apparatus, which will then be used against all social movements, including the movement for doing something about climate change. And the many, many other things that are part of the right-wing agenda in Project 2025. We have a possibility in our next phase. The MAGA agenda remains unpopular, even among many people who voted for Trump, who either were unaware of what he was going to do or didn't believe that he was actually going to do some of the things that he said. Those are the factors that give us the possibility in the next period, if we wage our resistance, to strip away, break up parts of the anti-MAGA coalition and push them back, push them out of power. I want to just add that this is not a moment where I'm going to go through particular things about all the specific things that are being planned in the resistance, but groups with expertise in fighting authoritarianism and have been doing scenario planning are active in this, and we can all keep our eyes and ears open. Jack's going to put in the chat a link to the Horizons Project, which are people who have expert in fighting authoritarianism around the world. They worked in Brazil, they're active in Hungary, they've drawn those lessons. And there was a mass call last week, sponsored by 200 organizations with over 150,000 people registered, and more, up to 200,000 people have now watched that call with specific ideas. Jack's going to put the link to the recording of that call in the website that they've put up. We are worth fighting for in the chat. The fight back's going to be of many kinds, and I just want to add that it doesn't have to wait. It shouldn't wait until Trump takes office. There are things we are demanding of Biden right now that he can do while in office to impede Trump's ability to implement his agenda when he takes office. I want to close on this note. The social justice movement has been here before. There was a brief moment in U.S. history where in a large part of the country, an alliance of workers and the oppressed held political power. This was the Reconstruction period right after the Civil War in the southern states. W.E.B. Du Bois called those governments in the South, the Reconstruction governments, abolition democracy. It was reversed starting in 1876. And the country faced 80 years of Jim Crow in the South, essentially a period of authoritarian fascist rule within the country. It took 80 years before the civil rights movement, the modern civil rights movement, took off, and in Second Reconstruction overturned Jim Crow, won the Voting Rights Act, and for the first time since Reconstruction, broke the white monopoly on political power, and brought this country close to being the multiracial, gender-inclusive democracy that it claims to be. The rollback of the gains of the 1960s already has proceeded for 60 years, and they haven't completed in rolling back all the gains we won in the 1930s and the 1960s. Our task right now is to prevent them from making further rollback and making the period of authoritarian rule weaker and shorter and come out the other side. If we learn the lessons of U.S. history and the lessons from around the world, we could do it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. I think we might have a minute because the Honorable Pamela Price is on her way, I believe. So if we have a minute to if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand real quick. I want to thank you, Max, for your brilliance and your for being here today. Everyone was so appreciative in the chat about your analysis. So important for us all to understand and realize all these things. So thank you very much. I'm still looking for Pamela. Does any, oh, so I see Aurora's hands up. Go ahead, Aurora.
Oh, thank you so much, and Cheryl and everyone, and for your very concise and good analysis. I guess my major question is, what is the economic strategy that does it exist that would basically transition our economics to an economy of replenishment of like that people are rewarded for making the world fertile and healthy again. Make like is there a repletive economics that we could start to um cultivate and reinforce and transition away from the extractive economics of that we're dealing with now that is causing the damage. Thank you.
I don't think there is something at the level of detail that there's an easy thing that one could just pull out the handbook and we all could read it and think that was great. But I think so that doesn't exist. But there are some broad strokes. A massive investment in renewable energies and rapid transition away from fossil fuels, combined with a prioritization of the social safety net and reparations from the global north to the global south and within the United States, can stimulate the economy, create much more positive outcomes for public health, and do something really, really serious about checking, mitigating the harms of climate change and reversing, preventing some of the worst possible effects. If that kind of program took place tomorrow, it would take a while, and it's not going to be in place tomorrow. But that direction, I think there are people all over the world, economists, experts, climate change experts, scientists, that kind of program could elicit tremendous popular support and makes real gains. So it's there in broad outline, and the specifics would have to be worked out as people take it up in practice.
Thank you for the question, Aurora, and thank you, Max, for answering and for being here this morning. And now we're going to move on to our next student who's going to introduce our next guest. Fatima, are you ready?
Yes, thank you so much, Cheryl. Hi, my name is Fatima. I'm a UC Berkeley Fellow, and I will be introducing the next speaker, the Honorable Madam District Attorney of Alameda County, Pamela Price, who will be talking about climate, fascism, and the law.
Right, you look so beautiful. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. This is so important. The conversations that we need to have now as we enter the age of fascism are very important. And so I'm happy to be part of this conversation. You asked me to talk for a few minutes, and I only have a few minutes, but I did want to honor the gathering and the folks and the effort, because it's clear that we have all got to get over um, you know, our kind of disappointment and despair and move forward. I'm sorry I missed Max. I see that he's leaving. I'm sure that there was a great presentation. It's always fascinating, and I wish I could stay and participate all day. But wanted to kind of jump in and talk a little bit about fascism, climate, fascism, and the law. I think, and I'm sure you all day will have the opportunity to really kind of flesh out where we are politically in terms of how very, if we're not already in fascism, we're there. We're at the knocking at the door. And what that means for me, certainly as a lawyer, is that the rule of law is compromised. And as your district attorney, I'm a target because Project 2025 says, that progressive prosecutors are on the list, are on the chopping block. And certainly, it's long been held. I think there's a line in the Shakespearean play that says, let's kill all the lawyers first, okay? Because the lawyers are the troublemakers, right? We're the ones that get in the way. And that's where we are. All of us have the call to action for us all is to get in the way. And definitely dealing with all of these issues around fascism and around climate, the climate emergency, it's absolutely essential. that people continue to be active and to get in the way, because the corporate monopolies that are leading us to fascism, as we see, with the formation of the cabinet and the new cabinet, and the way that the government is being essentially monopolized, corporatized. Some of us say the Democratic Party has been corporatized for a long time, which is just a symptom of where we are in the country. Certainly having the billionaires and the folks, the three wealthiest men on the planet, being in partnership with our elected president, says something about where we are as a country. And having a president who is saying that he's prepared to use the military and the National Guard on the first day to put down protests certainly does not portend well for any last shreds of democracy. And that's really those of us, we want to live in a democratic state. We want to have a society where one vote matters, where we do get to elect the district attorney, because as the top law enforcement official for the county, the district attorney has the ability to shape policies around the climate emergency. One of the things that I'm proud of in my tenure is that we were able to get a grand jury indictment of radius recycling. And I thought I would talk about that as an example of how the law can be used to serve people. In the history of Alameda County, radius recycling, which is also known as Schnitzer Steel, for all the time I've been here, it's been Schnitzer Steel in West Oakland, has a long and well-documented history of polluting the environment and releasing toxins, toxic plumes over West Oakland, which is a predominantly minority community, poor working class community, to historically African American community that has basically been subjected to all sorts of environmental racism. And Schnitzer Steel, their practices were at the heart of that. And so in June of this year, after really 5 weeks of presenting evidence before a criminal grand jury, number one, we convened a criminal grand jury, which is extraordinary for prosecutors to do it, to look at corporate crimes or environmental racism. That just has not been done from the traditional prosecutorial approach. And so our approach was different in the first instance, that when we heard about the fire in West Oakland last August, that we were willing and open to having a criminal investigation and looking at what the potential criminal penalties and liability could be for that case, or for that fire. And so we opened up that opportunity. There was evidence presented to a grand jury over a 5-week period, and the criminal grand jury, which is different from the civil grand jury. The criminal grand jury issued indictments against Radius Recycling and 2 of its corporate managers. And while I can't talk about the specifics of the case other than what is publicly known, and I encourage people to look at the indictment because there's a lot of information in that indictment, which was unsealed in June. And now the grand jury, I'm told the grand jury transcript is also available and unsealed to people. When you talk about the enforcing California's health and safety code, again, this is not something that the traditional prosecutors have been doing, but it is within the power of the prosecutor and within the power of the law to address, it's a tool to address environmental racism, to address environmental violations and corporate misconduct. And the kind of impact that, as we all know, corporations can have on our communities far often outweighs the impact that a single individual can have. Even if that individual is a serial violator, the number of people who are harmed by corporate misconduct are far greater. And in this case, it's no less than that, as we believe that the plume that emanated from the facility in West Oakland went as far as East Contra Costa County. It certainly went to, there were heightened levels of toxic particulate matter that can get into the lungs and cause respiratory illnesses and problems, particularly for elders and young people. Those particulate matters were measured at extreme levels as far as Livermore and Pleasanton. And so this was the kind of thing that impacted all of Alameda County, and therefore was certainly appropriate for my Consumer Environmental Protection Unit to look at. And it is a public service. It's the kind of thing, again, that prosecutors have the power to do. It's a way of using the law in not even really creatively, just to serve the public good and to protect public safety. And so that was what we did. And we're still doing, the case is still pending, moving forward. But these are the kinds of things that are in danger of not being able to occur in a fascist state, where you have a government that is committed to ignoring the rule of law, to targeting progressive prosecutors, officers of the law, who they don't want to, in fact, hold corporations accountable, and to using the power of the government also to, discourage dissent and to attack peaceful protesters and criminalize people engaged in protests. That is of great danger under a fascist government, and that seems to be the path that we're on. I also wanted to talk briefly about how the way that the corporate sort of masters in a fascist regime are able to use the media to undermine, again, people's understanding about the climate emergency and how critical that is. And from a legal perspective, what we see, a very dangerous trend where you have, and it's not a trend, it just is amplified in this season, I'm mindful of it, where you have police agencies that are able, and not so much police. We know that the government can subvert police agencies, but where you have police unions that are able to bond with the masters of media who engage in corporate misinformation. I apologize. And so that's something that I think people should be very mindful of, that is unusual, that has not been seen before. Police unions police unions are very much engaged in shaping the dialogue around public safety, and they have been doing that for decades. And what we now see is potentially a marriage of those who are shaping the dialogue around public safety with those who are also committed to misinforming the public around the climate emergency. And so that is something that needs to really be highlighted and looked out for, because that's a very dangerous alliance. So I think I've talked my time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think you have let's see. You have a couple more minutes because you're till 10:15.
Oh,
So if
okay.
you
All
want to
right.
continue, yeah.
Sure. Okay. If there are no questions, I'm happy. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about the work that we've done in the Alameda County DA's office, and certainly being able to address the environmental pollution that we are alleging that Radius Recycling and the two corporate managers engaged in is very important. Again, the grand jury indictment was the result of work that was done in the office for over the past year. We announced days after the fire that anyone who was impacted by it should contact our office so that we could determine how far and how damaging the impact was of the fire. It was, in our view, something that could have been prevented. And so we wanted to see And again, anytime you have you're able to use the law in a way that serves the public interest, the goal is to deter others from engaging in that. We then saw, because of the potential deterrent effect, we did see an effort by the corporate lobbyists on behalf of um, these type of metal recycling facilities. They attempted to get a law passed that would have immunized them from any liability for any harm or damages that people suffered as a result of their violations of the health and safety code. Fortunately, that effort was stopped, but again, that's something to be mindful of. And again, when we're talking about fascism and the law, corporations have the ability to manipulate the law, and to, if they can change the law, when they see what we saw with this situation, was they perceived a threat of liability. And perhaps some other district attorneys might do what we did. And so there was an effort directly to go to Sacramento and change the law, and that would then handicap us as district attorneys as well as civil lawyers from holding the corporations accountable. And so, like I say, fortunately that failed. But I would urge this group, as well as any other climate activists, to be mindful that they are very sophisticated, and they are not intimidated at all by trying to use the legislative process to change the law, to favor them, to protect them. And that is a hallmark of moving into fascism, is when they change the law, they use the law to their benefit. The lesson for us in America is, the person who's going to be our president was elected, just like Hitler was elected. And, it wasn't a coup. It was using the media and using corporate power to mislead people and have them actually vote against their interests. And make no mistake, they will lie about what their interests are. In America right now, that's not the case. We're seeing our corporate, the corporate barons of our day. They're not lying. Elon Musk is not lying about what his interest is. They're not hiding anything. They are right there in front of us, saying what they want and how they will use the government to achieve what they want. And so that is something that we have to, where we can, we have to protect the law, both at the local level as well as at the state level. So there might be some questions now.
I see Tom's hand. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. After the election, Governor Newsom had a mass call regarding the state's response to the incoming Trump administration, and also our Attorney General Rob Bonta has also talked about gearing up for possible legal actions. I was just wondering if there was anything being done on the county level, including communication with the state regarding any legal actions before, gearing up even before they happen, anticipating things, like the Comstock Act or whatever, especially on an environmental level.
Mm-hmm. So while I am, apologize. While I am the top law enforcement authority in Alameda County, that type of action is actually beyond the scope of my jurisdiction. Those conversations certainly were not had with our office, but if they were going, they would actually go to county council, who represents the county and would represent the county in any kind of partnership of that sort. I haven't heard anything like that. County council hasn't approached me, and certainly, as while we wish that we wish them well, we know that there's going to be some limitations as to what our attorney general can do, even under the governor's leadership. So it's, there's what I would say to people, there's a lot of talk, but hold people accountable for the action. And one of the things that we see in legislation, and you all are aware, there's often a lot of high talk and big talk about what this is going to do, and then the substance of it is not really there. And our legislators, unfortunately, also, will say they're going to do one thing and then they do something else. So, to the extent that they're look for the substance, is what I would say about any promises that are being made. It looks like Robert Davila.
Thank you, Tom, for the question. Robert, go ahead. Um, you have 4 minutes to get this done. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, how you doing? I just wanted to thank you for showing up and everything. And I never really thought about those connections that you brought up, but you know what I mean? It's like, wow, it's pretty serious, when you realize that they can, well, like I was thinking too, like as an investigator, is it possible to like maybe work with like forensic scientists? Like, they go to NASA has people on Mars rovers and they can detect the chemicals there and life and whatnot. So why can't we detect the chemicals that are being released here that might impact people's health?
Oh, we have the impact at my press conference that I did in October, which I can tell you the media did not show up for. I don't think there was one reporter that came, and certainly they didn't report on it. But we actually have the data from the Bay Area Quality Management District, and we presented that in charts. I didn't have a chance to bring them today, but I did a whole presentation at a media conference about 3 weeks ago to show the public the particles that have been released, and we talked about the impact on the health, and we showed the measurements where you could see what the standard measurement is, and I may be able to pull them up on one of these other computers. I don't think they actually gave it to me as um, in a document, but let me see. But we were able to show and to share what we tried to share with the public, but again, the media was not particularly interested in what I had to say about the job at that time. But we did share with the public what the particles showed, the readings over what was average in West Oakland, and then you could see the spike. And then also in Livermore, the same thing. You could see what was average over that period of time, over prior periods of time, and then you could see the spike. So that data is available through my office. You can get it through our communications department, as well as through the Bay Area Bay Area Air Management Quality District. I'm messing it up, but you guys know what I'm talking about. BAAMQD. And I think it's on their website that they have from that fire. You can see the way that plume traveled and the toxins that were in the plume. Some of them were extremely dangerous to people's health.
We have one more question, if you can make it quick, Viviana.
Hi, yeah. So I thank you so much, Pamela, for everything that you're doing. I actually used to be a hazardous materials specialist for the city of Berkeley, and I know a lot of our reports involve, contamination levels and things like that, and making them, useful to the DA so that you can actually do what you're doing now. And so now I'm in Sacramento. I just have a quick question. So I know that you worked off the health and safety codes. Do you ever execute, lawsuits against God, local policy, or is that is that in the DA's purview? So like, for example, we just admitted the climate action plan into our general plan. So now that's policy. It's getting implemented and it's enforceable, but enforceable by who, so I just wonder if you have an answer for that.
Yeah. It is, again, that would be something. Holding people accountable for policy is outside of my jurisdiction, although we use policy. I've used it particularly in this most recent season in addressing a lot of the police misconduct, where even though we may not find that an officer violated the law and we can hold them criminally liable because it's a high standard for law enforcement, but we look at policy and we say we're actually, making it a point to say to the law enforcement agency, okay, even if we are not going to prosecute your officers, we want you to look at what were the tactics and did it violate your policy or did it violate proper police practices? So policies are important. They are beyond the enforcement, power of a local district attorney, but they are extremely helpful to juries in making decisions about people's intent, which is what you have to prove in any criminal case and in any civil case. What was the intent? And certainly, if there are policies in effect and people have been made aware of the policies and trained on the policies, and they still violate the policies, and they do it in a way that suggests that they had the criminal intent to do so, then that's very helpful. So I would encourage you to continue to create, really strong policies that protect public safety and protect public health.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for the question, and thank you so much, Honorable Madame Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price. You will always be my Alameda County District Attorney. You have shown up. You've done so much, and I'm just so grateful and love you with all my heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love Alameda County. Y'all hang in there. Please, please keep pushing. Get in the way. John Lewis told us, get in the way. Okay.
Good trouble. Good trouble.
That's right. Make good trouble and get in the way. All right, y'all.
Right.
Take care. Have
Thank
a beautiful
you so
day.
much.
Of
Have
course.
a blessed day
you.
yourself and a weekend. All right. Fatima is going to introduce our next speaker. Moving right along. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. That was so great, Pamela. Our next speaker will be a PhD candidate in environmental and urban change in York University, Toronto, Ontario, Jacob McLean, and he will be talking about the apocalypse.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Thanks, Jack, for the invitation. Thanks to the co-presenters and to the CEMTF. I am a member of the Zetkin Collective. We're an eco-socialist group of scholars and activists looking at the political ecologies of the far right. And so today the initial title of the talk was Auto Apocalypse, but we're going with Great Driving Right Show. And what this is a bit of a excerpt from an upcoming book project that we're working on at the moment. I'm going to be reading, as I said, a bit of an excerpt from that. And it's on the topic of fascism, the far right, climate collapse, and automobility specifically. Look forward to, keeping the discussion going afterwards. And I'll get my slideshow going here. Apocalypse is in the air. Last summer, a group of Blade Runners started sabotaging the infrastructure of ultra-low emission zones, ULEZs, in and around London. Clad in black, face to toe, they target the cameras that scan number plates on cars, determining whether they comply with the minimum environmental standards or must pay the daily charge of £12.50. Some Blade Runners dismantle the structures entirely, removing the cameras and hacking down posts. The most deft, however, arrive on the scene with long-handled secateurs and snip the cables before making a ghoulish exit. What exactly is motivating the Blade Runners' sabotage? In the online spaces where the most committed congregate, all manner of conspiracy, cultural anxieties collapse into one another, railing against vaccines, climate lockdowns, cashless societies, gender ideology, 5G networks, and digital IDs. The Blade Runners see themselves as freedom fighters, resisting a totalitarian state with a global agenda. Yet it would be a mistake to discard these actors as cranks on the margins of society. Their contestation of decarbonization politics is among the most important frontiers for the organized denial of climate science, one that mainstreams far-right discourses and synthesizes fossil nationalism with a radical form of libertarianism. Though right-leaning street mobilizations were on the rise before 2020, the pandemic mutated and accelerated the pre-existing conditions. Its swirl of anxiety, misinformation, and polarization drew in new and unexpected sections of the population, especially from the petite bourgeoisie, many of whom found themselves participating in a social movement, on and offline, for the first time. Here they encountered more seasoned activists, alternative media, and conspiracy theorists who came equipped with the organizational experience and ideological frames necessary to diagnose and offer, quote, solutions to a crisis of apocalyptic proportions. Simultaneously, the pandemic choked off the steady mobilization of the climate justice movement around the world. Demonstrations turned into webinars, blockades into strategy discussions, and the lost momentum has yet to be regained. Meanwhile, the denialist apparatus of fossil capital-funded think tanks and advocacy organizations has played its part in ensuring the energies of the freedom movement are transferred to the terrain of climate. In the discourse of these movements, the world appears divided around a set of binaries: truth and lies, nationalists and globalists, freedom fighters and totalitarians, the suburbs and the city, workaday motorists, and climate protesters. Fueling the far right's conspiracy engine, such binary images present what could be called an inverted crisis. This inverted crisis at once mirrors and obscures the material crisis of planetary warming, promulgating narratives that are neatly aligned with the interests of fossil capital. In this framing, the crisis is not climate change, but what they, the globalist elite and woke mobs, are going to do about it. Solutions to the ecological crisis are framed as the crisis itself. At the center of it all is the so-called war on cars. As the crystallization of fossil capital, particularly its 20th century form, the car has become a linchpin of a way of life and a capitalist world system that cannot be altered by an aggregation of individual consumer choices. And as the energy transition becomes existentially urgent, the defense of individual automobility is fast becoming a cipher for a broader set of struggles. Symbolically, effectively, and materially, the car is a vehicle for the far right, channeling apolitical investments in the status quo into reactionary forms of anti-ecological politics. In this conjuncture, the car is a symbol of individual liberty, the nuclear family, and the energy-secure nation. In a populist key, the car is the people. The concept of the 15-minute city was coined in 2015 by Colombian-French business professor Carlos Moreno. The idea is to design cities so that citizens have all of their basic needs, including their workplaces, within a 15-minute walk or bike ride from their home. Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris and member of the Socialist Party, campaigned and won in 2020 using the 15-minute city concept as a slogan, vowing to create a bike lane in every street by 2024, and to do so in large part by removing 60,000 of the city's on-street parking spots. Hidalgo has not been without opposition, but there have been relatively few protests specifically targeting her efforts to curb automobiles and expand cycling and walking. It is a different story in the UK. In Oxford, efforts to create low-traffic neighborhoods, LTNs, which primarily entail the use of bollards and planters to restrict car access and pedestrianize certain areas, have been met with a wave of vandalism. In 2022, a single bollard in the city's East End, the most hated bollard in Britain, was vandalized 20 times, with some even setting it on fire. Similar acts of bollard bashing have been seen up and down the country. Again in Oxford, a protest against 15-minute cities attracted 2,000 people. A 12-year-old girl was handed the microphone to address the crowd. Doing her best inverse Greta, she yelled, "How dare you steal my childhood and my future, and the children of our children, by enslaving us in your crazy digital surveillance prison." Leaflets explained that the scheme was in fact a plot to trick the people into living in open-air prisons. Barbed wire fences, every movement watched by cameras, surviving on a diet of insects. This was the new normal, being smuggled in under the guise of green virtue. Such concerns echoed in the House of Commons, where MPs described the plans in Oxford as an international socialist conspiracy. There is a non-coincidental parallel between Leave Our Kids Alone, one of the main slogans of the growing anti-LGBTQ black backlash, and a Jordan Peterson tweet demanding elites leave our cars alone. It is the generalization of a libertarian don't tread on me ethos, where the state becomes synonymous with tyranny, and where the right to unlimited pollution is akin to the right to psychologically abuse gender non-conforming children. Change gears, not genders, reads one meme turned bumper sticker. Here, the anti-trans backlash is generalized to the social totality. From gender transitions to energy transitions, the point, inverting Marx, is to stop it. If, following Emmy O'Brien, the family is one site in the broader reproduction of capitalism, then what of the family car? As sure as the capitalist system needs to produce cars, it also needs to produce families capable of absorbing through excessive consumption the overproduction of materially intensive, ecologically destructive commodities and the attendant ways of life. The combined effect of this 15-minute sex panic, then, is to demonize and ostracize heteropatriarchy's escapees. Those who dare construct alternative social desires along with an alternative material underpinning. To refuse a private automobile, then, is tantamount to refusing the family. Such links between far-right natalism and climate denial feature prominently in the tweets of Jordan Peterson, who has recently turned his talents to poetry. In one poem, he ventriloquizes the global fear-mongering elites who speak from on high. Starve in the dark, peasants, you and your swarming hordes of carbon-emitting children, cluttering up the planet. The World Economic Forum and UN, whom he tags in his post, are thus framed as genocidal maniacs so consumed by a drive to reduce emissions that they are willing to commit mass murder. The coinage carbon-emitting children serves to construct a sense of crisis for the fossilized family. They do not want us to have children. They are killing us by taking away our fossil fuels. You are the carbon they are trying to reduce, says David Parker, a leading far-right activist in Canada, who shared a stage with Jordan Peterson in May 2023. It is through such chains of equivalence, a total identification of the people with carbon, that anti-environmentalism becomes ultranationalism and vice versa. Through this logic, burning fossil fuels, opposing policies and technologies of the energy transition, and reinforcing the nuclear family all become ultranationalist acts in and of themselves. You will not replace us becomes you will not replace fossil fuels. This discursive construction is not random, but rooted in historical and material transformations driven by fossil capital. It is centered on one of fossil capital's signal commodities, the car. It's no coincidence that the 20th century is commonly periodized into Fordist and post-Fordist stages. The car is the preeminent symbol of modernity, the commodity par excellence. Imbued with fetishistic qualities and reaching all corners of the world, the car illustrates self-expanding value in motion, activating circuits of accumulation before, during, and well after it rolls off the assembly line. The car and its defense are the ultimate expression of the imperial mode of living. Whilst workers in automobile factories became subsumed to the dictates of the machine, nature and space have been subsumed to the logic of the car, transforming social relations in the process. Residential streets made way for ring roads and car parks, landscapes were torn up for kilometers of motorway, train and tram networks were routinely decommissioned, and housing developments were pushed to the increasingly motor-dependent margins of towns and cities. The state responds to the ecological contradictions of automobility with a more straightforward technological fix, to switch out the internal combustion engine for a lithium battery. But this transition in personal mobility traverses geopolitical, economic, and subjective minefields. For starters, entrenched economic interests have to be maneuvered. The oil and automotive industry remain interlocked in a symbiotic relationship, with half of all global oil consumption flowing through nozzles to power road vehicles. This means a full electrification of personal mobility would be an existential affront to primitive fossil capital. The landscape of production has also dramatically shifted, from Europe and America decisively to East Asia, with China dominating the new car market. Speaking at a Michigan auto parts manufacturer in September 2023, before a crowd ostensibly, but in fact not, made up of striking auto workers, Donald Trump called for a revival of economic nationalism and our automobile manufacturing lifeblood. It was 2 weeks into the United Auto Workers' historic strike of the Big Three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis, and Trump was there to inform those gathered that the EV transition would ensure the future of the auto industry will be made in China and would even destroy our country itself. Hardly a temporary talking point rolled out solely for the UAW strike, denunciation of EVs was a mainstay of Trump's 2024 presidential campaign, serving as one more piece of evidence for his nation in decline thesis. Consider his March 16th, 2024 speech in Ohio. After a half hour of pure border panic in which migrants were figured as poisonous snakes set to inject their venom into the bloodstream of the nation, Trump pivoted to EVs, declaring he will impose a 100% tariff on Chinese automobiles manufactured in Mexico, without which the nation will be in peril. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it, he told the crowd. Biden's bloodbath subsequently became a campaign slogan, seamlessly moving between the border and the auto industry. Clearly, Biden's bloodbath was more than a metaphor for the imagined destruction of the auto industry at the hands of Chinese EVs. It was more like shorthand for the inverted American crisis. In May 2024, Elon Musk spoke at a gathering of billionaire right-wing donors and warned them that if Biden was elected, it'd be the last free election the US ever has. The contention that US democracy faces an existential threat has been widespread for years, albeit regarding the threat of Trumpism. Musk's concern, to the contrary, was that the Democrats posed the threat and sought to legalize millions of migrants and thereby secure a voter base sufficient for permanent electoral conquest. 2 months later, in the immediate aftermath of the first assassination attempt on Trump, Musk's pivot to the far right, evident for years now, especially since his eldest daughter's transition in 2022 and his subsequent vow to fight the woke mind virus, which he claimed had killed his son, finally culminated in a public endorsement. Musk was all in for MAGA. A Trump administration might afford Musk the ability to head off regulation in key sectors like AI and autonomous driving. Self-driving cars, after all, are now the main promise for Tesla's long-term profitability after the advance of China-made technology dashed its ambitions to produce a mass-market, low-cost EV. A Trump administration could also free up subsidies for Starlink, Musk's satellite internet company. And unions are increasingly seen as a threat, particularly starting in fall 2023 from the wave of strikes across Scandinavia in solidarity with Swedish union IF Metall to the UAW's victory in that year's stand-up strike and subsequent declaration of intent to organize Tesla workers. Tesla's anti-union politics were the reason the Biden administration snubbed the firm at a 2021 EV summit with the UAW and the Big Three, which further drove a wedge between Musk and the Democrats. But Musk is only the most visible and vocal of a long-standing rightward radicalization in Silicon Valley, within which techno-optimism, dark Enlightenment thinking, and accelerationism play an increasingly prominent role. Ultimately, we might have expected hard contradictions between so-called green capital and the process of fossil fascization. Musk's hard pivot to MAGA, however, suggests more overlap than contradiction. Most accounts of fascism suggest that some kind of crisis is required as its condition of possibility. In a world of shortages and scarcity, one can easily imagine how ultranationalism might function to separate the deserving from the disposable. But the climate crisis could, of course, also be a crisis for fossil capital. The transition away from fossil fuels towards renewables is existential for dominant lines of business. In light of this, what resources are at their disposal to mobilize in defense of continued accumulation? What narrative forms, prefigurative or imaginary, might make their crisis feel existential for others too? One answer we have offered here is the inverted crisis. The strategy of inversion can be spotted just about everywhere. In Germany, for instance, Naomi Seidt, sponsored by the Alternative for Deutschland, the far-right party there, as well as the Heartland Institute, styles herself as the anti-Greta, while anti-fascist and pro-refugee slogans are co-opted to defend the automobile. Kein SUV est illegal. No SUV is illegal, reads one AFD poster. On the surface, all of this might appear as a form of trolling, acts of transgression that might play well algorithmically, but have minimal effect in the real world. Such inversions, however, should be taken seriously. In The Great Moving Right Show, Stuart Hall showed how the crisis of Keynesian social democracy was exploited by Thatcher and her allies to build a new ideological consensus around the neoliberal project. To achieve this ideological transformation, Thatcherism worked on the ground of already constituted social practices and lived ideologies, thereby articulating a new common sense. Today, the right is dismantling and recombining, or as we have shown, inverting the elements of a nascent green transition. The inversion pivots on the car as an already constituted social practice, organizing the material and psychic investments of a world in crisis. As in Hall's time, the swing to the right is not a reflection of the crisis, it is itself a response to the crisis. Thus, the tendency we witness in this conjuncture for capitalist states of various political stripes to manage the crisis in increasingly authoritarian ways. Indeed, across advanced capitalist states, the repressive apparatus is hardening against climate activists. In this context, the inverted crisis is an imagined response to real crises, which it cannot redress, but which can be instrumentalized by driving politics to the right. The discourse around the war on the car constructs a dystopian image of a world without privately owned automobiles. We are not to consider the merits of fewer cars, more public transport, walking, and cycling. Instead, we are to see such initiatives as the machinations of a global totalitarian surveillance state. This hallucinatory dystopia forecloses the cultivation of desires for a world other than it already is. The inverted crisis is thus parasitical on the real crisis towards which the climate movement is oriented. It feeds on it while eating away at the collective capacity for mitigation. Soon, as the material crisis spirals, more dramatic mitigation and adaptation techniques will be demanded. A necessary and escalating climate movement will only provide ever more grist for the far right's conspiracy mill and become a preferred target for its vigilantism. The only way out of such a spiral, of course, is to force fossil capital from the driver's seat. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. That was so amazing. Wow, I'm just saying that was phenomenal. Thank you so much, Jacob. Um, that was really great. Does anybody, I see Jack has a question. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, Jacob, thank you so much. I really appreciate that talk. And I'm so impressed by the Zetkin Collective's work. I read their book, White Skin, Black Fuel, about the dangers of fossil fascism. The question I have is that you covered a lot in that book about Europe and the rise of the right in Europe, but I was still a little puzzled by why do countries that don't have a big fossil fuel industry still hate climate change? I mean, I can understand a country like the United States that has such a big fossil fuel industry that, they've got a big motive to fight against climate change and be deniers. But what about countries like, I don't know, Sweden and places like that? It seems like the right has this universal antagonism to climate change. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jack. I think it's obviously multifactorial, but um, building on the analysis we offer in this recent work we've done about automobility, I would point out that automobility and its entire apparatus and networked infrastructures is sort of central to all advanced capitalist states. So across Europe, the automobile sector is not only important for economic growth, but also sort of a certain established way of life. Suburbanization has, although not to the same degree as in North America, also taken place across Europe. And there is a lot of sort of path dependency with respect to these materially intensive geographies. So I think that might be one possible answer to the puzzling question, as to why countries without a sort of primitive fossil capital might also be seeing the rise of a sort of fossil fascist type of politics. Fossil fuels remain the sort of material basis of the entire capitalist economy. It's not just in the interests of primitive fossil capitalists, i.e., oil and gas coal companies. It's also in the interest of the entire capitalist class to continue extracting and burning fossil fuels. We could make an argument against the long-term interests, perhaps, of the capitalist class, presumably, or hypothetically, they would be materially invested in a stable ecology in the long term. But that's a hypothetical. There's some debates about that. Perhaps capital can go on accumulating amidst chaos, right? But more generally speaking, fossil fuels remain the material substratum of the capitalist economy writ large, not just in this particular branch of accumulation known as the fossil fuel industry. So I think that that's probably why we see this as a general tendency across the advanced capitalist world, and indeed beyond it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, for that. And thank you, Jack, for that question. Robert, you have a question? Can you make it really, really quick, please?
Yeah, so I guess through your analysis, which are excellent, I'm feeling like that that for a lot of people, I mean, they feel threatened. They don't want to give up like their vehicle, or it's kind of like their gun or something, you know what I'm saying? So they feel threatened. So then I guess the alternative is like you have to give people like, okay, well, what do we replace that with? Like, how can they feel safe, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. You can't just sort of say like give up your material belongings, and expect people to like join your political project. So it's definitely something that the left needs to continue to think about. Personally, I'm drawn to uh, instances of what Kristen Ross calls communal luxury, or what Kate Soper calls a sort of alternative hedonism. But the idea is basically we can have a lot of really nice things if we share them. So I think robust public transit investments, which most left ecological programs call for, are an excellent example of communal luxury. Massive investment would be required, obviously, and we can even look to things like car sharing schemes and micro mobility. I mean, I'm only speaking about mobility in this moment. Obviously, we can apply the idea of communal luxury to other sectors of the economy, but you know, uh, we can make massive investments in public transit, and we can, also make public transit free, which is an increasingly common idea that we're seeing. So rather than the kind of uh, backbreaking car payments that we're all used to. I'm not sure where that noise is coming from, but rather than the individual
Good.
automobile payments that we're all used to, and I mean, cars are a depreciable asset. They are an enormous burden on most households in terms of how much they cost. We could do away with this and move much more strongly towards the sort of communal luxury of, say, free public transit. It's a a huge political task, but this is the type of thing that we're confronted with in the ecological crisis.
Thank you, Jacob, very much. Appreciate you being here. You sound pretty brilliant. And I appreciate all that you shared because I'm sure it's a lot of new information for some folks. So thank you. And we're going to move on to Nisa, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Nisa,
are you able
we can
to
hear
me?
you. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Lisa's
Great.
another one of our College Core fellows.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Our next honorable speaker is, oh gosh, Perry Labiciero. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but let's.
You're doing good.
Thank you so much.
I'm actually, let me see here. My apologies. I'm actually switching from the computer to my cell phone. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Superb.
Jack, can
Okay,
you
okay.
spotlight Pierre, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've been having some problems with this computer, so my apologies. But thank you. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this in this event. This is really great. A lot of great information. I thank all the speakers and the organizers, and I thank you very much for the invitation. I will be speaking about Haiti and but what's happening in Haiti in terms of climate and fascism can be applied to several other countries throughout the globe. And what we've been dealing with Haiti, a lot of the problems that we are seeing in Haiti at the moment are the results of fascism. Fascism that has been imposed going back to the times of Christopher Columbus, his first invasion of the island in 1492. It was based on plunder and the destruction of the indigenous peoples' livelihood and their balance with the environment, where they did mineral extraction of gold and worked the gold to make ornaments. But it was in a way very in balance, in equilibrium with the environment. But the Spanish introduced a system of really depleting the environment. And so, and I will move forward from there, from that period on, to bring it more to the present, what we are dealing with Haiti today. Many times when you look at a lot of reports about what's going on with the environment with Haiti, we are dealing with the big changes that have been occurring worldwide because of the various emissions, the global warming impacts all over the world. It's very much impacting Haiti. And according to some studies, there have been noticeable increases in temperature since 1960, the decade of the 1960s, almost yearly noticeable increases in temperature and in warming around the Caribbean. And Haiti has been pretty much has seen those changes, how they are impacting the environment of Haiti. Also, we have been seeing how the impact on rainfall, for example, and how this is impacting the agriculture in Haiti. So you have a situation of the big emissions, these emissions from how they impact the overall global environment and how it's affecting the Caribbean, but more so on the local level, where the people could be dealing with the environmental degradation, could be presenting solutions, the impact of government actions in preventing local solutions from taking place, that's what I want to focus on a lot more. Let's look at, when we look at the environmental, the local environment, for example, many times Haitians are blamed, the Haitian peasantry is blamed for deforestation that has occurred in Haiti. However, that's not the story. What has been occurring with the deforestation, it's been a result of capitalism. It's been a result of the imposition. For example, when the French demanded that Haitians start paying reparations to the French government because we had successfully become an independent country and we decided to strike for our independence. France, the US, many of the Britain, Spain, they all supported France in demanding that Haiti pay reparations to the former French, I hate the term slave owners, but for sake of clarity so everybody understands what I'm talking about, they demanded that Haiti pay reparations. Now, this had to come in the form of cash money, but also in the form of resources. And one of the big resources that was used to repay that was, in addition to coffee and hard cash from sales of coffee, but it was also the payment in terms of timber. So Haiti was very heavily forested with mahogany, with various other tropical precious woods. And Haiti had to pay it by felling its forests in the form of those timber. I remember my dad was born in 1905, telling me how much of the timber was being felled from the interior of Haiti and being brought to the seashore so that ships from Europe and from the US could pick them up. There is also an article in 1905, article in the New York Times that talks about Haiti's inexhaustible supply of precious woods. So this is something else that highlights what Haiti had in terms of its precious woods and the deforestation that has occurred. So when we look at that period to today, you see everywhere it's talked about deforestation. But who are they blaming? The Haitian peasants for deforesting Haiti. So these are a lie. This is one of the many lies that is being propagated so that people don't get to the truth of the matter. And this was imposed on the Haitian people by fascistic governments that had the support of the US, many times imposed by the US and European powers. So there is a direct link between fascism and the imposition of fascism and also the degradation of the environment, as we are seeing in many countries. One of the examples, when the US government invaded Haiti and occupied Haiti for 19 years, there was increasing deforestation taking place so that the wood, the timber from Haiti could be taken, the wood from Haiti could be taken and brought to the US and to other countries. And so this accelerated, this intensified the culling of the forest. In the 60s, for example, as the US government was using Agent Orange in Vietnam, Papa Doc Duvalier, a fascist government imposed by the US on the Haitian people, he didn't use Agent Orange in Haiti, but he was inspired to do that and to prevent, for the same reason that the US was following this policy of preventing a forest cover for the Viet Cong. Papa Doc Duvalier, when he was dealing with people who rightfully wanted to overthrow his dictatorship, started a process of encouraging his cronies to cut down the forest in Haiti so as to prevent people access to the forest as refuge. And so a lot of the deforestation took place. It was intensified during the Duvalier years. But what has this done to the population in Haiti? for example, all those many fascistic governments that have been in place. We've had, during the presidency of President Aristide, we've had an effort to rebuild the forest, the ground cover of Haiti. And this has been, it was beginning to be successful. However, the same forces that started to destroy it continued to destroy it. But in addition to the physical destruction, to deal with the whole issue of climate change, you have to have a system of education where communities are educated, not education in theory, but it also in practice, where people are practicing the rebuilding of the land itself, of the environment. However, fascist governments do not believe in that. And so they tend to attack any form of local community organizations that are bringing solutions to these efforts at finding resolution. What we are seeing today in Haiti, when we compare Haiti with Cuba, when you have a hurricane that affects Haiti, and then you have the same hurricane affecting Cuba, you have more loss of life in Haiti, more loss of livestock. Cuba is better able to deal with the environmental impact of the hurricane and is able to quickly rebuild more so than Haiti can, because the resources of the community held by the governments go into the pockets of these fascist government officials, and there is nothing that is invested into the local community for rebuilding, for education, or for policies that will mitigate the impact of environmental degradation. When we look at agricultural production, for example, the same thing happens. The lack of investment in infrastructure so as to manage the soil erosion, so as to have a better control over the floodings that occur, for example, the building of reservoirs and various things like that, that could mitigate the negative impact of these hurricanes that have been growing in intensity, and also those longer periods of drought that are impacting local communities in Haiti. So as we are facing these challenges, one of the big problems that exist in countries like Haiti, and I'm sure many other countries in the global south, is the rise of fascist governments that have been there. There have been more of them. The intensity with which they've been increasing their attacks on the population that is resisting those policies that are destroying communities. And this is resulting in people being forced off their land. People are being forced to migrate. People are being forced to seek refuge in other lands. And then that is giving rise to a lot of what we are seeing today, the number of Haitian refugees who are fleeing. These are people fleeing from fascist governments, in the case of Haiti, that have been imposed since the coup d'etat of 2004 against President Aristide, and also policies that have been implemented by these fascist governments to negate or remove all of the gains of the popular movement from the 1990s on, during that brief interlude of democratic progress in Haiti. One of the things that was established under President Aristide was a system by which you had community brigades that were that received training in a program with Cuba, and I believe also with an agency of the US government. It was a rare experience, but that really produced results, where locally based organizations were trained to deal with hurricanes, floodings, various things, and bringing solutions, local solutions to dealing with these problems. And so during the coup, many of these brigades were destroyed by the coup governments. Many of their members were killed, and the warehouses destroyed, and people put in charge of these who were very corrupt and pocketed the money. And so what we have since then, there have been the hurricanes, there hasn't been any positive response, any effective response to deal with these impacts of the hurricane. So fascism is something that for the past 20 plus years we've been dealing with in Haiti, and we've seen several attempts or big big pronouncements made by several NGOs or the UN saying they are dealing with this situation and with that. But the basic problem is that it's not a government of the people, that our government of the people have not been in power. Local solutions, there is no investment in that. And so the link with the fascist governments have been really tremendously caused the kind of tragedy that we are seeing today in terms of people fleeing Haiti, the refugee situation. And then when they end up on the US borders with Mexico, we saw what happened in 2020, how people were being mistreated, how people are being mistreated in the Dominican Republic, and also in other countries where their rights as refugees are being trampled upon. So this is a serious issue affecting our people. Finally, I want to conclude by saying that also there is the same situation that had occurred, the greed that had pushed Christopher Columbus to attack and exterminate the local population, the indigenous Taino Arawak population in Haiti in 1492, is what is at the root of all of these so-called gang attacks against the population in Haiti. Just as in these old days, the several communities in Haiti have oil, reserves of natural gas, gold, bauxite, cerium, which is used to make glass and various other products, and cobalt. And in almost every area of Haiti where there are those deposits of mineral resources, those so-called gangs or death squads have been established to terrorize the population, to force people off their land so that they can take them over for the benefit of the oligarchy, and also tied with companies that are outside of Haiti that are seeking to seize the land of the people. And that's what's going on right now. So I will close with that. And thank you very much for having me. And let's stay in solidarity with each other. We need to destroy this global fascist system that they are trying to impose on people all over the world. And let's stand strong and fight this thing. Together we can win.
Amen. Together we can win. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pierre. It's always a pleasure to see you and to hear your wisdom. My mom visited Haiti a couple of times. She loved it there. She was fluent in French. And I know her spirit is very happy right now that you joined us this morning. So thank you. The ancestors are happy.
Thank you.
And so we're at time, which is amazing. And now is the time to take a 5-minute pause. And when we come back, Annie will introduce our next speaker. So if you want, and if anybody has any questions in the meantime, you can ask, but we're going to take a break. I see Robert has his hand up. Full disclosure, you see, he has the same last name as me, so he's my husband. And it's good to see you, Sheila, here, and my son Armando's here. Hi, Armando.
All right.
In
Great.
Barcelona. And my sister's here. So thank you, everyone. Go ahead with your question, Robert.
I just want to say free Palestine and free Haiti, because it's all the same struggle of fascism and racism and the fight against life and people. And so it's always about people and it's always about life.
Indeed. And in Haiti, we make the strong connection with the Palestinians. And it's something over the many decades, we've felt a kinship with the struggle of the Palestinian people, and I like to mention to people, I like to evoke the name of two brothers, the Ismeri brothers, Antoine and George Ismeri, who were leaders of the Lavalas movement. The Lavalas movement, Famille Lavalas, is the political party of President Aristide's organization, and the Ismeri brothers were assassinated because of their leadership role in that movement, which was fighting against fascism, and they had a global perspective. In the words of John George, our great John George, they were acting locally in Haiti while thinking globally. So.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm grateful. My mom introduced me to Haiti. I've never been, but I've done Haitian dance and have quite a few things in my home from Haiti and some artwork that my mom gave me. So Haiti's always on my mind and in my heart and in my home. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're going to take a pause. We'll be back in say like 2 minutes. So just hold on. We'll be right back.
So next we have Dr. Jim Ryan presenting about climate crisis and militarization project and Veterans for Peace.
Thank you, Annie. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, well, I appreciate inviting the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project to make a presentation at this webinar. I myself, I'm a veteran, served in Germany from 70 to 73. And even though I wasn't in combat, I still saw things that made me want to join Veterans for Peace later on. The other thing is I'm a retired research geologist, so I do recognize climate change and am puzzled by why other geologists who are trained in the field seems to want to ignore it. Not all, but the ones that make a lot of money from the oil business, they have a tendency more to ignore climate change. That is my main issue, and that's why I work with the Climate Crisis and Militarism Project. Okay, I also extend apologies from Janet Wheel, who has had health and conflict and scheduling conflict issues and could not, she was originally scheduled for this presentation. Now, when I took over from Janet, I was offered the opportunity to change the title of this talk, which is Peace Cools the Planet, Fascism Heats It Up. But I figured that since fascism was sort of the theme of this panel discussion, that I would sort of keep that in there. However, I made some minor revisions to the title that will better describe what I plan to present. And it is, does peace cool the planet and fascism heat it up? Now, first, it's sort of straightforward, and I don't really need to say too much about it. I would say, yes, peace does cool the planet, because usually peace coincides with international cooperation, which is what we need for mitigating the climate crisis. For example, the EU, which is European organization where all the states come up with relatively unified rules. Their emissions per capita are about half to a third of what the United States is. Of course, the caveat is that Europeans have always been a little bit more frugal. They don't want McMansions. They don't want a large car that they can't get through their roads. But all in all, I mean, they're a good example of cooperating and working towards a common goal of trying to mitigate climate change. Now, another thing, peace. Does peace cool the planet? Well, one of the only instances when our Special Climate Envoy John Kerry had mentioned militarism or anything to do with military was after the Ukraine war, the war in Ukraine started. And essentially he said he hoped that the war in Ukraine should not be an excuse to go back on international cooperation. Of course, I don't think his advice was followed. We're not cooperating very much with uh, uh, Putin and his allies, or even China. Things are breaking down. So his advice was certainly not taken. So that conflict is hurting things, or the lack of peace. Some background on Kerry. This isn't the when I said that this is the only time that he's really mentioned military in the context of climate change. The Climate Crisis and Militarism Project had a virtual meeting with his staff right after Biden took over as president. And I think Kerry was getting ready to go over to Glasgow for the COP that was happening then. And we talked to the staff and said, hey, we really would appreciate that, if Kerry would meet with us. We'd like to talk about what is going on with the military and the impacts of military on the emissions. This was also following a petition that we delivered to Envoy Kerry from about over 100 organizations and individuals, essentially calling on him to include militarism in working towards climate mitigation. Unfortunately, that was the last meeting we had with the staff. They did not answer our emails, so that didn't go anywhere. And like if somebody has heard of Kerry talking about militarism and climate change, please let me know. I know he has been long involved in trying to ignore that issue. He was one of the Senate backers of not including military emissions at the Kyoto Protocol meetings. So, okay, I've concluded that peace helps cool the planet. Now, does fascism heat it up? Now, what is fascism? Like I said, I'm a geologist. I'm used to looking at rocks. I'm not a political scientist. So I had to go to Webster's dictionary. Fascism is a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above individuals. It is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader. It's characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by a forcible suppression of opposition. So what I thought I would do is look at what folks call fascist countries and compare what they're doing as far as emissions. Now, what I used was an open source. It's the Energy Institute's statistical review of world energy for 2024. This was formerly run by BP, which used to be a government organization, and they've been putting out these reports for 80 years. And I put the reference in the chat if you ever want to go look at those numbers. One of the numbers they have is breakdown in carbon emissions total and also per capita for each country. Okay, so let's look at some of the countries that a lot of folks call fascist. Or let's first look at what the major emitters are. China is the number one emitter. I wouldn't necessarily call it fascist. It certainly isn't populist. I don't think there was a big revolt, but that was back in the 40s, and then the communists took over. So dictatorial, like I said, I'm a geologist, but I wouldn't necessarily call it fascist. The USA, maybe this time next year, I would call it fascist, but other than maybe flirting with it prior to World War II, just prior to World War II, I wouldn't say it was fascist yet. And at any rate, the USA has been historically the largest emitter for decades, and not during periods when I would say they weren't necessarily fascist. They had other problems, which I'll bring up. India, number 3 greenhouse gas emitter. And this is total numbers, not per capita. These are total numbers. China is number one, USA is number two, and India is number three. So it is populist, autocratic, suppression of opposition. I'd say this is pretty close. You could be calling it a fascist country. Russia's number four as far as total emissions. You could certainly call it a fascist regime. So got some yes, some no's. Let's proceed on this particular analysis. Okay, so I mentioned that the numbers that I'm using, the total numbers, but also let's look at the per capita greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the USA has a lot higher than China and Russia and certainly India on per capita basis, but it's not the highest. Canada is actually 27% higher. I wouldn't call that a fascist nation. The Gulf states, such as Qatar, because they're petroleum producers, some of them have 300 times the per capita, but that's also including, they're refining the oil and gas and things like that. Now, fascist countries that, consider fascist, I mentioned Russia. Per capita, their emissions are about under 80% of what USA's is. Again, per capita. China's per capita is less than half of what our per capita emissions are. India's per capita emissions are 10% of the United States's, but they have the numbers. That's why they come up and to be number three as far as emissions. Now, as far as looking at Western leading or Western progressive countries, Western European leaning countries, total Europe with UK per capita greenhouse gas emissions is 41%. So of USA's lifestyle, so substantially different than what we have. So I don't know if you would agree with this conclusion, but I don't see there's a direct conclusion between or correlation between a fascist country and high emissions. So at least based on the numbers that I looked at. Now, there probably was a correlation in the 1930s with the rise of Hitler and Mussolini, which were definitely fascist organizations. And then they built up, war machines and things like that. But right now, I would say no. So what are today's drivers on fueling the climate crisis? Obviously, we have a climate crisis. If I'm saying that fascism isn't it, what is it? Now, I'd like to give a few quotes, and the quotes I'm using are from Greta Thunberg's The Climate Book, which is a series of 100 essays. I highly recommend it, with prologues by Greta Thunberg, based on various themes that the essay's in. So there's 100 essays. Unfortunately, there are no essays on there that are devoted to militarism. The only one that I really saw that alluded to militarism, which is what I'm going to quote from, Amitav Ghosh, he highlighted the probable drivers in an essay called The Perception Gap. And essentially he said nationalism, military power, and geopolitical disparities are fundamental to the dynamics that have repeatedly stymied efforts to reach a global agreement on rapid decarbonation. In that sense, it could be said that conflict and national rivalries are fundamental drivers of climate change. In other words, it's the conflicts between countries, okay? And even though that country isn't fascist, it would be building up its military and stuff like that. So that's what Amitav Ghosh. I'm going to have another quote here shortly. So, like I said, other unfortunately, other than a brief mention, like I said, the role of military is absent. Now, for the sake of this discussion, let me just describe or go into more of Gosha's statement. Conflict and national rivalries are fundamental drivers of climate change. How is that so? And also, what is the role of the United States? Well, another book, which I'll have one quote, but I highly recommend if you really want to get into the weeds on militarism and climate change. And let me see if I can get there we go. The Pentagon, Climate Change and War by Dr. Nita Crawford of the Cost of War Project, and she's now at the University of Oxford. Now, what did she have to say about the Pentagon, climate change and war? Essentially, she said that for more than 170 years, the U.S. economy and military have been on a path that has become a deep and self-reinforcing long-term cycle of economic growth. Fossil fuel use and dependency, expanding military power, and increasing military spending. So there's two things going on here. So we have you don't know, we have 800 bases around the world. So we have 800 bases. So that means we have to protect those bases. We have to get to those bases, but we want those bases to refuel our planes, to have launch pads or whatever in the particular areas. So it's a cycle. We want to supply those bases. That increases emissions, and we want to extend those bases. Like Air Force is building new bases in the West Pacific so that we can extend our reach closer to China. I also want to mention, it's sort of a little throwback to I mentioned we had meetings with John Kerry's staff back at 2021. They said, hey, you know that all these bases that we have overseas, all the emissions are essentially gifted to the host country. In other words, they're credited to the host country, not to the U.S. military. So again, what Nita Crawford says in her book, and it's not just something that's happened now. We've been doing this. I think the picture on the cover of the book is the Great White Fleet. That was back with Teddy Roosevelt, sort of extending the reach of the U.S. military, and that sort of influenced putting coaling stations and then oil stations and all those things like that. Sort of, progressed hand in glove, the military and also the economy, because people would be paying for all these materials that we had to be put in those various stations. Now, another good book, which I won't have any quotes from, is David Vine's The United States of War, that describes the same phenomenon, but actually starting back before the war with Britain, the Revolutionary War in 1776. Washington was sent to Ohio and Michigan to, set up bases so the economy could extend to the West. The United States has been doing this ever since its inception. Now, I have another quote here from, well, not a quote, but information from Stuart Parkinson, who is the Executive Director of Scientists for Global Security. They calculated that global militaries create a total of 5.5% of total greenhouse gases, and of which the United States is the largest contributor. If you don't know it, the Department of Defense, if it were a country, would rank 54th. As far as emissions, total emissions, and it is the institutional #1 emitter of CO2 in the world. So it's bigger than Exxon and so forth. And like I said, if it were a country, the Department of Defense would rank 54th. If you add the military-industrial complex that supports it, you'd be getting up into like the rank of the 30th or so. Now, this is based on 2019 data, which I'll let you know is old, but it's the only time that the Department of Defense ever reported, and they still ever reported their emissions. So they're not reporting their emissions. NATO's not reporting their emissions. A lot of these numbers are based on estimates by like Nita Crawford and other folks. So I think what I'm saying here is that one of the reasons why many countries have large emissions, or there are large emissions, and Amitav Ghosh says, we're not solving the climate crisis because militaries are so big. Well, the U.S. is, like I said, the number one emitter. It's also the number one as far as size of the military. We spend over twice as much as China, over 10 times more than Russia. And if you were to add up the next 10 countries combined, as far as most of those are our allies, we would, we still outspending the last 10 countries. We could cut our expenditures for our military in half and still be spending more than China and Russia combined. So where am I going with this? What drives this military spending? It's sort of a circular system. Congress gives money to the military. Half that money goes to contractors. It doesn't all go to soldiers and things like that. And then the contractors, in turn, donate lavishly to Congress. In 2023, in advance of the annual defense budget, defense contractors spent $70 million lobbying Congress. $70 million. Now, during the war on terror from 2001 to 2022, war contractors spent $2.5 billion with a B on lobbying. That's a lot of alligator shoes and lunches. So the money is going to Congress, and Congress gives the money to the Army gives the money to, or the Navy, go on the circle. Now, if you think I'm just piling blame on the United States, I'll give another quote from
Jim, you just froze. Let's see. I don't know what to do now. I guess he left and will come back. Well, this is live, so um, things happen. Oh, I'm off camera. Sorry about that. Yeah, things happen, and hopefully he'll come right back on. So let's see. Have you come back on, Jim? I apologize for this, but like I said, this is live, so we don't know. Stuff happens.
Can
No,
we
it
chat
doesn't look
about
like he's.
this presentation? I have a comment I'd like to make while we're waiting.
Go ahead. Yes, go.
What's up, everyone? My name is Armando. I'm Cheryl's son. And I'm out here in Barcelona studying degrowth, environmental justice, and political ecology. And we just had a series of classes by Jason Hickel saying that imperialism is symbiotic with capitalism and they're like mutually dependent. And that like the capitalist economy has been waging imperial violence against the world through military action, through like structural adjustment programs, and like locking them into these these like predatory debt relationships. Basically, that the U.S. military and these financial practices, so the World Bank and IMF, are basically like strangling the global economy. And yeah, he's completely right. The military is not counted in the climate negotiations, and yeah, it's like a major problem. War is bad for the planet, it's bad for the earth, and we need to get to a paradigm in which we repurpose those capacities. But yeah, I just want to say that this guy made a very strong argument about the relationship between imperialism and capitalism, and how we need the capacity for our overconsumption in the north is because we appropriate, exploit the global south to the degree that we're like getting like trillions and trillions of dollars of their material, energy, labor, land, and money through unequal exchange, where we get their labor and resources for like very cheap deal, like a very bad deal for them that cripples their economy, and their ability to meet their own like public needs. And that yeah, so you made a pretty persuasive case about that and how we need decolonization economically, in the sense that we have to like create a ramp out of capitalism through getting global north countries to go through a rapid reduction in resource, material, and energy demands from both the global south and the world in general, and that like I'm losing the punchline here, but basically like we had to free the global south from these neo-colonial relationships where we're like extracting the capacity to kill the planet from them basically through our consumption patterns, and then yeah, and pay reparations. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, my amazing son Armando, for filling in at this moment in time. It doesn't look like Jim's come back, so I guess we'll just keep it moving because we're right on time. And Sophia is going to introduce our next amazing guest, and Sophia is another amazing UC Berkeley Fellow that we're honored to be blessed with this year. Thank you, Sophia.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? We good?
Oh, I'm saying yes and I'm muted, but my thumb was up. Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Madame Listowea. She's from the Arab Resource Organizing Center, and she's presenting on climate, fascism, and Palestine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Let me take a second. Thank you guys so much. Hello. It's been such an incredible conference so far. Everyone's been so interesting to listen and learn from. I'm honored to be a part of this, and I'm so grateful to Cheryl for championing this work and for the amazing support facilitators. Thank you so much. My name is Nadat Liftawiya, and I am a Palestinian activist, educator, and artist. I say artist, I'm a mosaic artist, a spoken word artist, an actor, and orator. I'm originally from Lifta, Palestine, which I will talk about later, which is part of occupied 48 Palestine. And now I live on Ohlone lands in Oakland, California. I received my BA and 2 BAs from San Francisco State University and my master's in social work from Cal State University in Hayward. I am currently a school program manager and a professor at the University of San Francisco. I also work as an organizer and member leader with the Arab Resource and Organizing Center in the Bay Area. So thank you guys so much. And why are we trying, why am I here trying to make the connections between fascism and climate and Palestine? The connections between these things are not made enough. And we must be ready and willing to combat this climate crisis through an intersectional and human rights approach. Because climate justice, it can't just be about climate justice, right? We also need it to be about gender justice, disability justice, racial justice, and so on. Because environmental destruction that Israel is assaulting on Palestine is an assault on our earth, right? It's not an assault on a people, it's an assault on all of our earth. Yet, as a climate movement, we don't hear typically about Palestine enough. We never have. And when our social media and news is filled with visuals of Israel's massacre of our children and our elders and mothers and fathers, still we don't hear about the connections enough, right? So while many climate and environmental organizations are denouncing Israel's atrocities, we need to take center stage in every movement and focus our interwovenness in all these movements. So the same attitude is being applied to the case of environmental violence, right? We're feeding what is known as environmental racism. this practice is self-defeating. As we know, carbon emissions, like the speaker before me was talking about, carbon emissions, deforestation, and ecological collapse harm not just the local population, it harms the entire planet. This harm is truly, in all sense of the term, colorblind, right? So the environmental impact on Gaza, Israeli attacks on innocent native people in Palestine have now reached over 650 tons of carbon emissions, surpassing that of 26 countries combined. So with the genocide in Palestine and now expansion into Lebanon, we are 3 times that number now. That was from the first 124 days of this genocide. So one of the most, excuse me, one of the most concerning environmental factors has been Israel's use of white phosphorus, which are prohibited, as we all know, in every sense, in every law. But we all also know that all those laws are delusion, right? When it comes down to implementing them for the sake of human rights. But human rights groups like Amnesty International have documented the use of white phosphorus in Gaza, and environmentalists and climate folks understand that this is not only a weapon of horror and destruction to the humans who are being genocided right now, but also it remains in the soil and it seeps into our food and into our rivers and into our bodies, right, for decades, for however long, harming our earth and humans long term. So the ecocide in Gaza, they're using degrading the environment as a weapon for Palestinians. They're leaving the land unusable. And let's start with the official definition of ecocide. It's the unlawful and wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment. So the environmental damage, excuse me. So the environmental damage and demolition, which we're referring to as ecocide, is deliberate strategy. And what this does is it compounds the humanitarian crises that's happening because of the genocide, and it poses a long-term threat to the region's sustainability and the health of the inhabitants, not just today, not just the next generations, but for generations and generations to come, right? And the environmental crisis in Gaza is a stark reminder to all of us about the interconnectedness between genocide, environmental degradation, and human suffering. As international bodies continue to document and condemn these environmental crimes, it is imperative for us to push for comprehensive assessments and restoration efforts in the region as soon as we can. Holding those responsible accountable for their actions is crucial to preventing further ecological and humanitarian disasters. And it all begins with a permanent ceasefire called. So climate and the humanitarian catastrophe. Throughout history of this occupation specifically, and now what has turned into the active genocide of the Palestinian people, there have been interwoven crises because it is not enough that issues relating to climate disasters or melting glaciers or endangered species, emissions or sustainability. It's not enough, or any other topic that's considered to be climate related. It's not enough that these are the only issues that climate movement is working hard to tackle, right? The underlying systems that are here, the injustices and the root causes that bring about these climate crises and continue to aggravate them should also be taken into account just as much as the climate movement itself, right? So we must know that our struggles are interwoven, that there are global stakes at place here, not just in Richmond, where the refinery is, right? But globally. And we must hold those complicit accountable for their actions. And we must commit to doing that in all of our movements aligned. So this is from Systems of Colonialism and Militarism Destroy Both Human Rights and the Environment, right? We know this. So this Visualizing Palestine slide series depicts the intersection between the Palestinian human rights movement and the environmental and climate justice movements. You can learn from Palestinians' experiences living under Israeli apartheid in a part of the world that's warming faster than the global average, which is no surprise with how many bombs have been dropping on them, right? And we must understand how environmental justice concepts such as toxic occupation or green colonialism and extractive colonialism impact Palestinians first and foremost. I love these slides because it's easy to extrapolate that the exact same dynamic that is happening within this country, right, the US, within the North American continent and globally between colonial states and the global South. And I'll just wait a minute for people to scan the slide before going to the next one. So this next slide is the term green colonialism is used to describe a variety of policies and practices in which green discourses can reinforce colonial legacies and intensify colonial losses of land and rights for the indigenous people. This includes the ways that indigenous people are often marginalized in conversation or green energy project, as well as greenwashing projects that use environmental protection as a justification for land grabbing and displacement. For instance, I'll talk a little bit about myself and my village while you guys scan this. My village, which is called Lifta, itself is one of these green washed villages. It was a major village en route to Jerusalem. It's like the first suburb outside of the city of Jerusalem. And so people traveling to Jerusalem all throughout history would, and there was also a natural spring in Lifta right before Jerusalem. So people traveling to Jerusalem would stop, stay there or refresh there and continue their journey to Jerusalem. And now it has been greenwashed. And now it has been greenwashed. And now instead of my village with the hundreds of homes that were there, there's a beautiful park there for children of all ages, different areas, places you could walk. I want to say that I suppose it's nice that people can enjoy beauty there, but it is a type of colonialism and displacement and expansion that should not exist for Native populations. And finally, colonial extraction or extractive colonialism. What this refers to is a type of colonialism in which the systems and institutions of the colonial power function to extract raw material and commodities from the colonized territory for the sole purpose and benefit of the colonizers' economy and population, their own population. Extractive colonialism can also be a feature of other forms of colonialism, such as settler colonialism. And just for our California information, currently Chevron and their affiliates have greenlit a $24 million investment to boost gas production off the shores of Gaza, which is a prime example of colonial extraction. So how else is Israel extracting and colonializing and greenwashing? And what are the paths to climate, human, and environmental justice? And can Gaza be the blueprint for ecofascism? We need to start to ask that question. In the beginning, Zionists said no one was there, right? No, there was no people, a land without a people. But historically, the colonial acquisition of land is justified through the legal doctrine of terra nullius, which is a Latin phrase meaning no one's land. This concept was used to assert that since natives didn't use the land to its maximum value, settlers were justified, morally obligated even, in seizing the land from the native population. And then came the Zionist mantra that Israel made the desert bloom, which is a constant refrain used to justify the Zionist colonialism, posing the country as barren with no people, and they as ecologically responsible stewards came and saved our land, right? And now there are hundreds of Gaza real estate events happening all over the US. And just in January, thousands gathered at a settlement for security event where plans for a new Israeli settlement in Gaza were presented. The New Gaza group pitched attendees a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take part in rebuilding the Jewish city as a green technological city. As long as there is something for capital gain from exploitation, the global north will continue to defend this pattern of environmental stratification and the destructive results it has for native populations. And if we're willing to turn a blind eye to ecofascism demonstrated in Israel's campaign against the Palestinians, we will risk falling prey to an endless cycle of climate-based terror. So let's get into some of these eco-fascist tactics that Israel has used and continues to use today. Greenwashing by the Jewish National Fund. This is where the left side is where they raised an entire village in means to hide ethnic cleansing in Palestine, which is their entire scheme. And it started before the state of Israel started because they wanted to establish Jewish settlements before the occupation began. And now the Jewish National Fund plants trees in the Negev as a continuation of this takeover. Don't forget the trees are planted, that they're planting are not native to this land. So they are planted over ethnically cleansed Palestinian villages and raised cemeteries. While the water crisis in Gaza is now catastrophic, the Palestinian struggle to access water long predates this. The root cause to Palestine's crisis is not the lack of investment, but the political reality that Israel is an occupying power and they're using water apartheid against Palestinians. And the same as the supply of electricity in Palestine. As part of the military blockade of Gaza, Israel has destroyed civilian energy infrastructure everywhere. The occupation has also limited Palestinians' ability to even develop their own green infrastructures. Solar farms are being targeted. So Chevron. These are the corporations that continue and support the devastation of our earth. There are many examples of corporations profiting from both fossil fuel extraction and business with Israel, and the one most dear to our hearts, since it's local, and many of my heart and many of my comrades in the Bay Area, is Chevron. Chevron profits from fossil fuels, fueling both Israeli apartheid and global climate crises. We must take stock and understand how the refinery in Chevron influences political power. They also operate a local news outlet called the Richmond Standard. It also pays for another radio show called the Radio Free Richmond. Chevron also moved $3 million into political committees to support candidates. In 2021, Chevron spent more than $6.7 million on congressional lobbying. We need to understand that the Palestine boycott, divest, and sanction movement, as well as climate activists, we are all asking consumers to boycott Chevron for all of our benefit, not just the benefit of Palestine. We remember this from 2005 when they ruined this 6-year-old woman's tree. The tree is over 100 of years old. So finally, to finish up, our path to climate and human rights justice. We need to take immediate actions are necessary to halt this destruction and ongoing harm that's happening with the genocide. We need to demand for stricter regulations and accountability on environmental and human rights grounds. Movements across the globe need to unite for both Palestine and climate. We need to have restoration and reparative justice immediately. The path forward is a global, unified effort for a just, sustainable world that respects human and environmental health. And there should be calls for unified actions across climate justice and human rights movements. We must also support all ongoing Native and Indigenous initiatives occurring on the ground in Palestine, such as the Palestinian Fair Trade Association, which distributes thousands of olive saplings to Palestinian farmers. Also, that's why the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights has partnered with them. And for over 100 years, Zionists and U.S. fascism has been trying to silence and erase Palestinians. But we know what we're doing. We don't only love and live life, we teach life. And so utilizing and uplifting Palestinian initiatives and voices on the ground will strengthen and get their narratives out. We know our land, as the land knows and will never forget us. I'll share these slides with Cheryl, but here are some environmental justice initiatives in Palestine. They're all linked for people to read up on and join and support. Also, I've put some of the resources that I got my information from that you guys could peruse. I put a slide up of upcoming events. And I'll just back up really quick. On this slide, there's a Bay Area event calendar. So you know how to plug yourself in. It's called the AROC event calendar. Know how to plug yourself in, where to plug in, what your capacity is. We need everyone on the ground. And here's a slide of just the next couple of days and the events that are happening. And from one of my favorite Palestinian activists, everything in this world can be robbed and stolen, except one thing. This one thing is the love that emanates from a human being toward a solid commitment to a conviction or cause. Ghassan Khanafani. So please, I will end with choose your commitment, choose your cause, and fight like hell anytime you are privileged enough to create change. And I believe in my body and in my bones that from the river to the sea, Palestine and all indigenous peoples will be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Nida. You made me cry. Wait, hold on. Wow, you brought tears to my eyes. Yes, free Palestine. Palestine will be free in our lifetime from the river to the sea. Thank you, Nida. Nida is also a well, we're both on kpfz.org. You can listen on Thursdays, this coming Thursday, the 21st, and 2 weeks, every 2 weeks after that. We're on Women's Voices on KPFC that comes on at 9 a.m. We have like a 10-20 minute slot starting around 9:10. And if you want to join us with my sister, who is a co-host, Lynette, and Akila on Women's Voices, KPFZ, Thursdays, 9 a.m. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank all the speakers, Kim for the land acknowledgement, Max, what an amazing talk that was, and the Honorable Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price. And I must say, never in my time, I've been in Berkeley for 40, no, did I say 40? Well, yeah, since 81. So, and never in my lifetime have I seen the Alameda County District Attorney show up, speak up, be there for the people. So it's a damn shame. I won't use the other words I could have started to say, but it's a shame that she has been recalled, as well as Chesa Bodine in San Francisco. But that's the world we're living in right now. And I also want to thank Pierre, that was amazing, and Jacob and Jim. I'm sorry that you had issues with connection at the end, but we're in a surveillance world, so I don't know if that was accidentally on purpose from those people on the outside or not, but thank you for being here. And Nida, again, that was just amazing. You brought tears to my eyes. And I want to thank you to the fellows because, they were here, they showed up, and they've been doing an amazing job, and they introduced the speakers, and we appreciate that. And Jack and Karina, thank you for always being part of CEMTF. And I want to thank a special shout out to my son in Barcelona, who I can see is watching and eating. And my sister Lynette, who is also here, and my husband Robert. I didn't see my daughter, but she's working, so she probably couldn't make it. But and we have to stay united, stay in solidarity, stay just cognizant of all the things that are going on and the lies that are being told. And I also want to thank everyone for their donations. We had 190 people registered, so that was amazing. And I appreciate that. And our next events are coming up: Climate and Education on January 17th, 2025. Couple days before that, 45 returns. And Climate, Youth, and Seniors on March 21st, 2025, which will be my 38th anniversary. I just wanted to thank everyone, and also wanted to make a couple more announcements. Today at 2:00 at UC Berkeley, Sproul Plaza, I guess the students are going stepping out to protest what happened on November 5th. And tomorrow, Saturday, the Middle East Children's Alliance is having their annual event holiday crafts fair where you can purchase items from Palestine. So I would support, if, during the holiday season, which it's going to be another hard season to celebrate, which I'm not sure how that will work, but if you can support Palestinian businesses during that time, that would be great. Support Palestine in any way you can. I'm wearing my keffiyeh. I wear it every day. I hand wash it because it's an honor to wear it, and I want to make sure that it's clean and representing properly. So you can get your keffiyehs too and start wearing them and supporting Palestine because they are beautiful human beings, just like we all are. We're all one human being on this earth, and we must honor everyone. Oh, I guess Spency was here. I'm sorry, Spencetta. I did not see your name. But I'm trying to host and do all these things. But anyway, thank you for being here, everyone. Have a blessed day. Stay healthy, be safe. And if you're in town on Thanksgiving Day, aka Thanksgiving, the indigenous sunrise ceremony on Alcatraz is an amazing event to take part in. I'll be there. My sister Lynette will be there with us, with my daughter and my husband. And we'll save the chat and I'll put it in the with the recording when I send that out. I've been a little slow sending out, but I'm going to send out the last 3 recordings very soon. And I want to give a shout out to Sheila. Hi, Sheila. It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. And thank you, everyone. Have a blessed day. Stay out in the struggle and peace. Let's hope for peace. And let's hope we make it through the next 4 years. I know we will, because we're going to unite, get organized, and be together. So we got to be prepared for what's coming. And there's an evaluation form in the chat if you want to fill that out. It'll also be in with the recording. So thank you all. Have a blessed day. And I meant to drop a couple things in the chat, but you can go to Middle East Children's Alliance. They're asking for registrations for tomorrow because they'll have a lot of people. It's in Berkeley. You can go to AROC, Arab Resource Organizing Center, and their event page to see how you can connect. And yeah, stay healthy, be safe, because we still have COVID and more people are getting sick. So have a blessed day. Thank you all. Bye-bye.